Hello. So we're back at Deep Images. We've returned after a long siesta. You probably won't be seeing this until January. Um, it's kind of like we're light years away. So by the time you see this, like in Prince of Darkness, we're broadcasting from the year. But anyway, so today we're gonna do Japanese cinema, and we're not gonna attempt to like make any kind of monolithic statement about it. It's just a country that has produced like thousands and thousands of incredible movies, and a lot of people haven't delved into it yet. So, or they've only delved into maybe one genre, or whatever. So between us, we kind of came upon a range of genres that we like and that we can talk about. So we're just gonna talk about some ones that we enjoy, that we recommend, and then if you'd like, go hunt them up. If you've already seen them, cool. If you agree or disagree, leave a comment. And I'm gonna turn it over to Justin for a special announcement, and then he's gonna talk to us about his Japanese selection.
Okay,
Justin. Uh,
thanks, Henry. And before I start, I'd just like to remind everyone who's watching to please drop a like on this video and to subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. I'm sure you will. So thank you for viewing, and please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, talking about Japanese cinema, one of the genres, my favorite genres probably, is horror films. Not gore so much, potentially, if I've had a few drinks, possibly gore, but generally suspense films and horror. And I think the Japanese do horror films really well, from what I've seen. And the one
yes.
I was going to hone in on was Ringu, or The Ring, the Japanese version. There is a very good remake actually with Naomi Watts, but I guess you can't really beat the original. And I do enjoy watching subtitle films, and Japanese in particular. So The Ring is a 1998 film. It centers on a videotape or video cassette that's effectively haunted or cursed. It in parts shows a vision of a well, and nothing more, just the well inside a home. But if viewed, it turns out, if you view this video cassette, the viewer has something like 7 days before they're going to be killed by a ghostly spirit. And the spirit appears as a dead girl psychic, who was a psychic when alive, with long, lank black hair. So she looks very creepy. And that's really the one word you take away from this film, is it's a creepy film, very suspenseful, good psychological horror. Um, Now, it's particularly unnerving towards the end of the film. By this time, various protagonists have been killed off, particularly those who've watched the video cassette. And the main protagonist is trying to work out the riddle of what's happening with this cassette, and eventually works out the story where the dead girl's psychic was actually kept trapped in a well over a number of years, and so she's seeking vengeance, and it manifests itself on this video cassette. So it's particularly unnerving towards the end when the dead girl crawls out of the well and moves forward and kills one of the protagonists, who effectively frozen as this figure is advancing from the well. And I found that part particularly unnerving, and
Great.
creeped out by it. So yeah, it's a great film, and certainly if you haven't seen it, recommend you do so. There's a couple of other similar films with the same sort of imagery, such as The Grudge, which I think is from about 2002, and likewise was remade in American films as well. Um, but that relies more on a haunted house theme rather than a haunted or cursed object. Um, with the house that was inhabited by a family where the father had actually killed his wife and child. So it's more on the haunted house, as the central part of the film, but it has similar effects in terms of the creeping figures and some very similar special effects
Mhm.
to The Ring. So that's another good one if you want to watch it. There's another one as well which had very similar imagery, more recent, which I watched on a flight to LA back in about 2018. So when I can normally watch 5 films during that flight, so that was one of the ones I watched. So yeah, Japanese
Good
horror, I
choice.
think that they
Yeah.
do it really well. And I don't know much else beyond that in terms of Japanese cinema, but I think I've got a lot of admiration for Japanese society and culture. Very polite people. If you've met them, and they've got some interesting ideas or themes about life after death, I believe. Very
Mhm.
spiritual type people as well. And I've always found their manga films quite interesting as well. So that's a big part of Japanese cinema, and
Hmm.
can be quite risque as well. Some of their manga films. So that's really my contribution
Okay.
on Japanese
Nice.
horror in particular.
I'm
We
so
appreciate
glad
it.
you brought up Ringu in particular because I love that movie. That's one that I grew up being like absolutely terrified to watch, and I did not watch it
Mhm.
until like a couple years ago, and
Yeah,
absolutely love it. It's phenomenal. I need to work my way up to the grudge. That one still kind of creeps me out.
Yeah,
I,
I
I
think
want to make.
Ringu kind of changed modern horror in a lot of
Oh,
ways, all across the
Definitely.
absolutely.
board. It's like when it came in, it's that jerky camera kind of action,
Hmm.
along with the sound effects and all of that. I
Hmm.
mean, it really, I think, kind of my memory is that didn't exist before Ringu. That type
And
of,
even the woman with the
yeah,
long
right.
black hair who's shaped
Hmm.
funny, or
yeah,
yeah, that's what they call, that was what they called the beginning of J horror. In other
Yeah.
words, when it
Hmm.
became
yeah,
exported, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is great!" And it's like, well, where have you guys been all these
Yeah,
years?
right.
But it's
yeah.
okay. I wanted to say to Justin, actually, and to of course anybody else. Uh, I can recommend tons of other Japanese horror, and I'm sure several of us can as well. And we'll talk about some as we go along. I wanted to
Mm.
say real quick about The Ring. There's a ton of sequels. My favorite one of all of them, even more than the first one, is The Ring Virus, which is a South Korean remake. And I actually felt like, and it was made before the American remake, and I actually felt like it clarified and presented the plot in a more interesting way to me personally.
Hmm.
After watching all the sequels, I've watched all but like one or two of the sequels, watched the remake, didn't watch the remake sequel. So it's like I saw the Ring Virus on YouTube, and it's like, what is this? And it's like, it's South Korean. And the way the characters handle this phenomenon were really, it had me more, um that aspect of it, them exploring the mystery of what Sadako was, what she was, her origin was. I thought was a little more interesting in that one. Conversely, I want to say Rings, the last American one with Vincent D'Onofrio, who I do love, so don't take this bad, Vince. But that movie to me is a piece of just shit, and totally missed the point of all of the movies. But it's the opposite of the Ring Virus. It confused and complicated and overdid, and of course Americanized everything.
Hmm.
And D'Onofrio's, few lines were the only thing that really held my. I mean, I'm like, oh no, Vincent D'Onofrio's talking. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm gonna move on. We're all gonna move on to
Can I say
Kaylin's.
one thing real quick because this is a bit of interesting
Oh
folklore?
Yes.
Yes. Come on, this is really cool. So you're
yeah.
talking, you guys were talking about how like that figure of like the ghostly spirit with like the long black hair and
Hmm.
everything. That's actually a Japanese folklore type of spirit that shows up
Oh,
in
okay.
a lot of cultural things. It didn't start with the horror genre, but they started using that in a lot of horror films. Um, but it's inspired by a lot of stuff from the Edo period, with like funeral aesthetics, with like the white gown. The long black hair is a very common thing. And some people think that that dates back to kabuki theater. And so you can kind of see how
Okay.
all of these cultural things play into that cinematic thing that we see over and over again. So I just wanted to bring up that bit of trivia because I'm
Okay,
a
I'm gonna
little
I'm gonna
more nerd.
piggyback off of
So
you real quick. I'm gonna piggyback off of you real quick, as Keith would say. Uh, some of the also is influenced by No Theater, NOH, which is a
yes.
more modern avant-garde, and they incorporate those figures. I think with a character like Sadako and onward, what they did is they modernized, stylized the
Mhm.
hair, the flesh, the movements. But you're right, that figure, it does figure in uh several older Japanese movies. It's just they kind of like modernized the look and
Yeah,
made it iconic. But you're absolutely
definitely.
right
Yeah,
about
that's
it.
a really good
Yeah,
way to put it. Hmm.
cool. So what's your first selection?
Kayla.
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So my my couple selections here go together because of one particular person, which I'll get into in a second. So my first pick is a 1952 film called The Life of Oharu. And this is a really, really wonderful film. This one has been done with like the Criterion Collection and all of that. Really, really stellar film. This one is directed by Kenji Mizoguchi, and it stars Kinuya Tanaka, who is actually the director of my second pick. So she was this really, really well-known, very successful actress during this period. The film is about an older woman who is looking back on her life, named Oharu. So Oharu was the daughter of a royal samurai, who worked for the shogunate and everything. And Oharu basically has a love affair with a man who is below her station in terms of like nobility ranks. He's a page, she falls for him, they have an affair, and they get caught. So he gets executed, and her entire family gets banished from their town. I think they're in Kyoto.
Shogunate.
Mhm. I know, right? Gosh, those shogunates and all their power. So this is set during the Edo period, also known as the Tokugawa period because of the Tokugawa shogunate. So a little bit of history there, and that's going to be like the 17th through like mid-19th century. So Oharu's family gets banished from Kyoto. She gets forced by her father to prostitute herself, basically to make herself useful, because it's her fault in theory that they got banished, all because she dared to love this guy. And
always got to be the woman's fault, huh?
It's always the woman's fault. Yes,
Jesus.
I'm on a feminist tirade again, guys. I'm sorry. So so she ends up having to bear this guy a son, and she does that successfully. She gets really depressed. She tries to end her life. She doesn't succeed in trying to end her life, and then she gets shipped off to all of these different places doing all of these different kinds of work, and just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing keeps happening to her until in the end she kind of has to become like a street prostitute. So it's kind of like one of those fall from grace stories of like, oh, the woman did this like sinful thing and she's like fallen from her station, and then she's sad for the rest of her life. It's really depressing, but it does have a lot of really good commentary on women's role in society during the Edo period, and honestly into modern periods as well, because these gender roles stick around even if it's not the same exact situations happening to these women. It is still like women are expected to be virtuous and all of that. And you see that in a bunch of different cultures. It's not just in the West. You see it in Japan as well. Yeah. For me, like one of the most horrific parts of the film is that she goes to become a nun at one point, and she gets kicked out after being seen naked with a man who was trying to rape her. So literally victim blaming, and it's really trash. But in the end, she goes off, tries to find her son. She becomes a wanderer. And then you get back to kind of the beginning of the film where she's in this temple going through all this like reflection, thinking about back on her life and how she got where she is. So it is absolutely wonderful. The cinematography is beautiful. The music is incredible. I cannot stress enough how much I love the music in this film, because
Wow.
I love Japanese music.
Me too.
Yeah, their traditions. I'm just kind of glancing at my notes. I also I forgot to mention this is based on a short novel called An Amorous Woman. So this is another of those adaptation films, very, very excellent. And like kind of in the grand scheme of things, it was very important because it drew a lot of international recognition to Japanese cinema in general, because remember, we're talking about the 1950s.
Yes.
And then for Mizoguchi in particular, and for Tanaka in particular, it really kind of cemented their status on the international stage as like a phenomenal director and a phenomenal actress.
Can I say something about Mizoguchi?
Absolutely. Yes, please do it.
So I have seen about 12 of his movies. Some I remember better than others. Life of Oharu was one of the first, so sadly I remember it the least. It was good though.
It's so good though. You need to do a rewatch.
However, the 3-hour long early 1940s original, well, maybe not the original, they might have made one earlier, the early 1940s, 47 Ronin, which is like 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
No lie, I've watched that 3 times in my life, all the way through. And
Reasonable.
it is not like Chambara movies where they're jumping up and down and cutting.
Mhm.
You know, we talked about Lone Wolf and Cub last session, and yeah, it's not even like Mifune. It's mostly talk. It's mostly political. It's socio-political, but it's still just as fucking compelling. So, you know, I adore his movies. So anyway,
Yeah, no,
go
he's
ahead.
brilliant, and Ronan is kind of one of those that everybody needs to
Oh,
see at least
one
once,
more.
but three does sound like a good number of times.
Oh, one more thing. So
Yeah.
yes, specific to exactly to what you're talking about, is he gained that reputation as being a woman's director. That he
Hmm.
usually
Mhm.
portrayed women, well, as David Lynch would say, a woman in trouble, you know, and that kind of thing. And now he was preceded and influenced by Mikio Narusa, who I'm going to
Hmm.
cover later. Uh, but it's a similar stream, and there's some other filmmakers like that too. But you know, that was a particular. Those movies interest me for whatever reason. One, that they're women's point of view. The other is that they're so much older than like a lot of the more popular movies like Kurosawa even. You know, like
Yeah.
1930s through 1950s, and you're like, wow, this shit was groundbreaking, and Hollywood was doing absolutely nothing like this.
Yeah, no, this is exactly why, like, my other pick as well is also from the 1950s.
Okay.
I love this period of Japanese cinema because, like you said,
Yeah.
it's really groundbreaking, like on a global scale. The stuff that they were doing is just so phenomenal and so underappreciated and underrated. There's a lot of people, I think, in the West who don't really explore this period unless they're like really into Japanese cinema. And I really wanted to draw more attention to it, just kind of this like post-war period.
Excellent. So what do you want? Okay, so we'll talk about your next pick when we do the go around, right? So
Absolutely.
okay. So I'm gonna turn it over to Keith. Um and he wanted to talk just a little bit, and he's gonna lead into one I'm gonna cover. So go for it, Mr. Moderator.
Well, okay. Well,
And welcome back.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, Japanese cinema is not one I'm well versed in. I have seen Ringu and The Grudge, so you know, I'm at least familiar with some of those, but that's really my thing. I haven't gone deep into Japanese cinema, so I'm pretty basic. I've seen some Kurosawa. Um, I would probably highlight not Seven Samurai, which most people are aware of, but I'd probably go for Throne of Blood if I'm going to pick one,
Mm,
which was Kurosawa's Macbeth.
Mm.
And the adaptation is just it's an amazing film. If you haven't seen it, the performances are just so good and emotional, and the set design is black and white. It's stark black and white, and the set design is gorgeous. They utilize, again, just like Henry was mentioning, that no style in terms of like body movement and masking and stuff like that throughout. So, you know, if you enjoy that kind of thing, also
and the
even
supernatural element.
yeah,
Hmm.
that's what the evil spirit. You know, they use the masks with that, and the music is no style with the drums and the flute. It's just it's all about atmosphere and experience, and that creeping dread throughout. It's just an exceptional film that I highly recommend. It might even be a way of engaging English teachers, engaging younger students in high school who maybe don't want to read Macbeth. By showing them Throne of Blood,
Mhm.
they might actually kind of be into it if they get it in that context. You know, like a lot of teachers use the Leo DiCaprio Romeo and Juliet, try to get their
Oh
kids to kind
God, I
of
had to
get
watch that when
Romeo
I
and
was
Juliet,
in high school.
Yeah.
I
right? I mean, they do that,
I didn't
but
even
think of
like
how much
it.
cooler it would be if you're showing your kids Throne of Blood, right? So
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
that might be a thing, especially because you know the current generation is really more open and into that kind of off kilter or outside of America
Mhm.
approach to things like that. And Japanese culture is a thing
Hmm,
that,
hmm.
and
Hmm.
so, you know, and I was just kind of thinking about that. You know, I think you might be able to engage some students with that
Yeah.
and make them appreciate Shakespeare a little more when they can see what you can actually do with it like that. Because, yeah, Kurosawa's approach is not to sit there and be enslavishly adapt it. He makes creative changes, and I mean, it's not just a setting change. I mean, he creates something new out of this. It's still at its core the story of Macbeth, but it's also its own thing. And so recommend that highly if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it, maybe it's time to watch it again. The other
Can I make
thing
a quick aside regarding teaching real quick?
Yeah.
Just because speaking of Kurosawa and teaching, so I teach college students, and I will say with Kurosawa, for any teachers who might be listening to this, it's going to be a little divisive. Some of them are going to absolutely love it, and some of them are going to absolutely hate it, and there is nothing you can do about it. I taught Rashomon this semester, and oh God, some of my students were just like, oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And some of them were just like, I got literally nothing out of this. Why'd you make me watch this? Pick something different next semester. And I was just like,
wow.
Okay.
Wow, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
How are you in a film class and not able to appreciate Rashomon?
To be fair, it's not a film class; it's a gender studies class. But
okay.
Film,
yeah,
so.
okay. So you may have people in there that don't have an appreciation of cinema already.
Yeah. It's gonna vary a little bit. I did mostly more contemporary films, but I wanted to get in at least one or two really good classic films in there that were kind of relevant. And so, like, if you're talking about sexual violence, I showed them Rashomon. And
gotcha. Okay. I gotcha. That makes more sense. The other thing I would bring up, and this makes it current, because, and as much as we hate to always be current, to sometimes be current, I guess not always, is that, good Lord, Godzilla -1. If you haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet.
I want to.
Excited about it. You guys have been talking about it, and I've just
listen.
been like,
I when I was a kid, it was Godzilla all, anytime. It's Saturday mornings after school, it comes on. Never took a Godzilla movie seriously. I never felt like, other than the original. Okay, as an adult, if I go back and I would watch, any Toho Godzillas, I'm always looking at it and kind of going, man, this cheese ball, I'm not into it. I don't get it. I loved it when I was a little kid, but as an adult, I can't get into it. But goddamn, go into Godzilla -1, and I'm into it, and I'm into it big time. This is such a good movie. It somehow did what I never thought you could do with a Toho production on Godzilla, and they just brought the A game out the wazoo. I don't know how they accomplish this, but it pulls you in emotionally in ways you've never thought about in a Godzilla movie. And there's a point in the movie where and I didn't even know this was going to resonate with me even until it happened. There is a point in this movie where suddenly the music from the original Godzilla movie starts playing, and it just like, oh man, it was like, it was almost an Infinity War kind of moment.
Oh man,
wow.
I gotta go see that.
It was like, oh man,
I crave those.
Yeah. I mean, this is I can't even, I mean, even with the American Godzilla movies, I can't remember the last time I was feeling anxiety about Godzilla appearing. I've seen other people referencing this movie and saying, there's some things kind of like Jaws. And I'm like, that aching dread. You want to see the shark, but you're so afraid the shark's going to show up. And it's like, there was some of that, but really ramped up. I mean, you're like, you don't know, is he going to show up? And it's like, it's terrifying in a lot of ways. There's a dread and a worry and a concern, and then that parallel story with the guy with PTSD and the guilt is just heartbreaking. It's just, wow, this is how you do a movie like this. You can take the silliest premise and make such a good movie. It's just a good movie. It's not a good Godzilla movie, it's a good movie.
Well, Gojira was a great premise. And it's just, it veered around over the decades, and I remember, if Keith doesn't mind me, I'll try not to embarrass him, but he opted out of our kaiju panel because he didn't feel that, he could really get into this stuff real seriously, and that's absolutely fine.
But the table has turned. One of us.
I'm telling you, this thing is so good. It's just so good.
I wish Tim Tolbert were here. Quick note to Tim Tolbert fans. I know there's probably a legion of them because he is the Sasquatch, and He has missed the last several sessions. He's got a lot going on. However, he is supporting the channel tremendously behind the scenes and coming up with ideas. And I'm incorporating a lot of his stuff into the things that Kaylin and I discussed as topics. He was going to come on tonight and talk about Matsumoto's Funeral Parade of Roses, which is an extraordinary film. I have that on Blu-ray. So he didn't make it, unfortunately, but hope you're watching, Tim, because that guy is a kaiju freak. I don't mean, well, you know what I mean.
Well, you're saying he's a freak
Phrasing,
and he's a
Henry.
kaiju. That's what I
And
heard.
he's a Sasquatch.
Yeah, that's
Obviously,
what I mean.
obviously, he is in fact a kaiju. Sasquatch counts as a
Yes.
kaiju.
Yes.
Kaiju are just giant monsters.
He's the animal, vegetable, mineral man.
Yeah, there you go, from Doom Patrol. Hey,
really
before I
need to
toss it
watching
back
this.
to Henry, of the four of you, who all has actually seen -1?
No, I haven't seen it.
Not yet.
Just
No,
Bill.
it's on my
Okay.
to-do list.
I saw it at
Bill.
IMAX.
I might go and see it
IMAX.
now.
Oh man, I can't even
Ooh,
imagine. Man.
Yeah, that sounds worth it for IMAX.
Oh God. So Bill, you'll back me up, right? This is really just an amazing movie, right?
It's maybe other than the original, but by far even more than that one. This is the first one that made me care about the human characters, and I wasn't just, come on, let's get some cities broken up here. You know,
Right.
Exactly.
You're right.
In this one, you don't want that to happen. That's the thing. Yeah, this is the one where you're actually they've created it so that you don't want it to happen because you care about the people. So now you're terrified like they are about what's about to happen.
And the effects are amazing. The fact that this was done
15 million
for 15 million. He said, I wish I had 15 million. And you realize I don't want to kick someone when they're down. But okay, so you could have filmed 20 of these movies for the cost of one, The Marvels.
Yeah.
And this movie, low budget. This is a low budget movie by any standard of the imagination.
Due to inflation, especially.
The Godzilla movement when Godzilla comes through the city, and his movements and actions are just incredible, and they're threatening. It's not just he's moving in a way that actually should, and it does scare you. I can't even remember a time a Godzilla movie scared. The first Godzilla movie is a good movie. This one is better. I mean,
wow.
It's better.
That's high praise from you two guys.
That is very high praise.
Yeah. I mean, this is easily going into my top films of the year. Maybe the top right now.
Well,
I can't think of another movie I've been thinking about this much afterwards. You know?
And I just want to say, as a longtime Godzilla fan who has seen every single one of them many more times than once, it warms my heart to see other people agreeing. Critics who normally would have not even thought about reviewing the film, much less giving it a good review, are praising it. I feel a little validated. I'm not going to be one of those idiots who are like, oh man, I really liked it when nobody else did, but now they sold out, man. Godzilla sold out. Yeah, just shut up. You weren't special before, you're not special now. Appreciate everyone else is now appreciating something, and yeah, it's great. It's great to see, and
I appreciate that the director is also the writer. So again, you're having
and the special effects man
and the special effects overseer. Yeah, I mean, and so you're getting a unified artistic vision. I think maybe for the first time on a Godzilla film.
What you just said, I think, is the reason why. And listen, I love Marvel films. I love all the Marvel films to a degree. But one of the things that's reducing their effectiveness is the fact that everything is farmed out. There is no one vision. Yeah, Ray Harryhausen's monsters might have been a little flickery, but his hand was in every frame. There's a consistency. And when you look at the effects now, they don't compel because they're being made. They're like McDonald's hamburgers. They're not great, they're not terrible, they're in the middle, and they're always the same.
Standardized.
It's this really. I'm
economies of scale.
I really hope this film will cause a reevaluation. Not just the failures of 2023, which were horrendous, and $1 billion just from Disney lost
down the drain.
Yeah, I hope that the failures and the successes, look at Oppenheimer, look at Barbie, look at Godzilla -1, look at the ones that hit and see what lesson. It's easy to see the lessons of a flop, you
Right.
know. What are
Except the
lessons-
studios will always take the wrong lesson away from the
Oh,
flop. But
absolutely.
They do.
they
Yeah.
always across
Especially
the board.
Bob Iger.
Yeah.
And sometimes like flops are literally just you didn't promote it enough, or you didn't promote it in the right way. You didn't get to your target audience.
Yeah.
But-
So that's what happens,
yeah.
you know? And that always
Bob Iger is saying, he changes his story every few days
I
about the
know where you're
Marvels,
going.
and he's like, it was because of COVID. I'm like, dude, COVID's been not a thing for a while culturally.
Don't say it's
You-
not. Okay, culture.
Yeah,
That's
exactly, yeah.
Do not.
It was
do
about the strike.
not.
It was about the strike.
Yeah. And the thing is,
Oh
I
yeah, the strike too,
like
like
the
Justin
Marvels,
said. Yeah,
like
yeah.
kind of like Bill
Yeah.
said, it's like a McDonald's hamburger. It's fine. I like it when I'm eating it. I don't mind it, but it's not a gourmet burger, right? I
Right.
mean, we all agree. We know what there's nothing exciting and there's nothing new about it when you're biting into it, but it's a satisfying meal when you eat it.
Sometimes you want Wagyu beef, and sometimes you just want fast
right.
food.
And
Fine.
so,
They
and the
have
thing
other
is,
plates.
I think the thing that this is definitely us going down a rabbit trail, but this is,
Sure.
but the Marvel's lack of success wouldn't be such a noteworthy thing that if it hadn't cost them $200 million to make. There's no
No, it cost $264 million.
yeah, I'm 200 plus. Yeah, it's like it would. There's no excuse for a movie that costs and wastes that much money not be an absolute blockbuster. Period.
Right.
I don't think there's ever an excuse. There's no reason with that much money going into it that it hasn't been perfectly carved and shaped to fit exactly what it needed to do. And this one is this is a movie that should have cost no more than maybe what, 40 million?
Oh yeah.
No,
Tops.
under 25.
Yeah, I mean, the way it was a modest. It should have cost no more than a Shazam movie. Let's just say that.
Well, 125.
you know,
150. Yeah.
And I'm just kind of blown away by the fact it's like I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I'll watch it again. All that, but there was nothing to justify the money. And then you have something like Godzilla -1 comes along and says you can do this at $15 million, even if it's okay. Let's double that to make it in the States. I mean, for 30 million, you could do this for $30 million. Why are you spending 200 million?
Right.
Why are you spending 250 million? It's absurd.
I mean, the answer honestly is capitalism. Like,
yes,
people want to get paid. They want to make as much as humanly possible. But
they're not doing capitalism very well then.
Because if you don't make your money, if you don't make that money back plus some, then it's capitalism in reverse.
No, capitalism is you spend $30 million and you make $100 million.
Yeah,
you put that 70 million in your pocket. Spending $200 million for a movie that's going to lose over 100 million, that's like bad socialism. That's not, I don't know what
let me clarify real quick before we go off onto like too big a political tangent here. What I mean is people want to make money, and that is why they think that you need to spend so much so that you can then make even more. That's why they want to hire the best talent, which
that's
costs
Hollywood
money,
thinking,
and then it snowballs. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah,
they screwed it up.
They need
but
to
the last 2 or 3 years has demonstrated that does not translate. There used to be this mindset, and I don't think this is a Japanese cinema mindset, but a mindset that the more you spend, the more you're going to get, and that's just not how it works. If you're going to spend that amount of money, you need to make something better. It needs to be better. It needs to be that proportionally better. That's why something like Endgame hits and it goes berserk and makes $2+ billion is because they may have spent $300 million to make it, but it also is
it's on the screen.
Yeah, it had so much soul. Like it was just good art. It was
and when you've got movies, and this is where Godzilla -1 again comes to the fore. This is what happens when you carve out a script. You don't start filming without fucking
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
We'll
You
fix
know?
it in post. We'll do reshoots.
No,
Yeah.
just
only
because you accomplished that well on one movie doesn't mean that's the standard now for every movie.